Today's shir is based on the classes and teachings of Rabbi Y. Jacobson and others. There was a man who used to come regularly to his local bar. He would come every night and he would order the same exact thing. He would order 2 drinks and he would sit down by himself at the table and he would drink both of them. And he would do this for years. One night he comes into the bar and he only orders 1 drink and he drinks it. And the bartender turns to him and says, why are you only ordering 1 drink? For years you've been coming here and you've been ordering 2 drinks for yourself. So the man looks at the bartender and says, years ago when I was in the army, I had my best friend. We were in comrades in arms. We were fighting together in the war, and unfortunately he was killed. And he loved to drink. So to commemorate his memory, I come here every night for all these years, and I make a toast. I drink 1 shot for me and 1 shot for my friend to commemorate his memory. So the bartender turns to this man and says, okay, so why tonight are you only ordering 1 drink? So the man looks at the bartender and says, I quit drinking, but my friend, he still didn't quit drinking. We're in the season now, in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, of growth, of change, of quitting some of our negative, self-destructive behaviors, our negative tendencies. And it's a very confusing time, the whole topic of growth, the whole topic of change. Because for most of us, we're not new at this. We've been through this multiple times, this round of change, and trying to transcend and trying to perfect ourselves and refine ourselves. There's a fascinating idea that illuminates for us how to go about the lifelong journey of change. The Mishnah at the end of Maseches Yuma says a very famous quote from Rabbi Akiva, and I'll read it. Amar Rabbi Akiva, says Rabbi Akiva, Shreichem Yisrael, how lucky are you, Klal Yisrael. Lifnei mi atem etarim, who purifies you? Who makes you white as snow? Mi mitahareschem, who purifies you? Avichem shebashamayim, your Father in heaven. Shenemar, as that pasuk says in Yecheskel, V'zarakti aleichem mayim taharim utahartem, I will sprinkle or pour on you pure waters and you will become purified. V'ayman, it says in the Navi Yirmiyah, Mikveh Yisrael. Ma mikvah metaras hatmeim, says Rabbi Akiva, just like a mikvah, the ritual bath is metaher, someone who's impure. Af HaKadosh Baruch Hu metar es Yisrael. So too, HaKadosh Baruch Hu purifies Klal Yisrael. Very famous Mishnah. It's been turned into a song as well. But if you think about it, it's a very strange Mishnah. Because what was the Chiddush of Rabbi Akiva? We know the idea of tshuva, the idea of change, the idea of purification, the idea of returning. That concept was already introduced to the world on the first day that Adam HaRishon was created. On the 6th day of creation, HaKadosh Baruch Hu introduced the concept of tshuva to Adam HaRishon. We see again the idea of tshuva when the Shvatim came before Yosef HaTzadik. Yosef did not reveal himself to the Shvatim until he was sure that they had done tshuva and that they changed from their ways of what they had done to him beforehand, and only then did he reveal himself. We see again the concept of tshuva that's brought down by the Chet HaEgel. And Moshe Rabbeinu pleaded with Hashem, and that's a major source of learning out the idea of tshuva from the whole Maisa of the Egel. So what is Rabbi Akiva's Chiddush? Like a novelty that he just discovered that he has to teach us, that there's this gift called change, personal transformation, returning to our source of who we really are. What was his chiddush? And what was his source? The sources that he brought were from the Navi Yecheskel and Navi Yirmiyah. Why would he have to go to the Navi Yecheskel and Yirmiyah way before that? In Bereshis, like we mentioned, and even in Parshas Shemais, like we mentioned, we already had the concept. What was Rabbi Akiva's big chiddush over here? And that we finish off Maseches Yuma, which is about Yom Kippur, with Rabbi Akiva. The Lubavitcher Rebbe says a fascinating, beautiful, and inspiring thought to understand this memory from Rabbi Akiva. If somebody becomes tamei, nowadays we don't have this halacha so much, it's not as relevant, but in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, the halachas of Tumah v'Tahara were very, very makbid, because you couldn't go into the Beis HaMikdash if you had any Tumah. So there are different levels and there are different intensities and types of Tumah. If somebody touched a dead rodent, like a dead mouse, he became tamei. But the way he became tahar was he would go to the mikvah that day, and then when the sun set that night, he was tahar, completely tahar, the same day, as long as he went to the mikvah and he waits to the night. However, if somebody touches a mace, a corpse, a dead person, so that level of tumah is much higher, and the tahira, the purification process, is more extensive. He has to go to the mikvah, but then he has to wait 7 days, and then there was a whole process afterwards. But he wasn't tahar right away. He had to wait 7 days, and then there were other halachas and other things he still had to do. What's the halacha if somebody, the times of the Beis HaMikdash, had both levels of tumah? He touched a dead rodent and a mace, a corpse, on the same day. So what does he do? So one would think, well, because he's anyway not going to become tahar until 7 days later, there's no point in him going to the mikvah and purifying himself for the tumah of the sheretz, of the rodent, because he's anyway going to be tamei mace. But that's not the halacha. The halacha is that very day he needs to go and immerse himself in the mikvah, and that night he'll become tahar from the tumah of the sheretz. Oh, but he's anyway can't go to the Beis HaMikdash. He's anyway tamei because of the other level of tumah of the corpse of the mace. It doesn't matter. We don't say that going to the mikvah for the sheretz is pointless because it's not going to bring him into an ultimate state of tahira. We don't say that. You go to the mikvah, you're tahar for this tumah, and then 7 days later you become tahar for the tumah of a mace for the mace. It comes this season before Yom Kippur when people normally slow down a bit and engage in introspection and try to change negative habits, try to change bad midos, try to change addictions, try to change certain patterns of self-destruction, try to improve and refine ourselves in certain areas of serving Hashem, whether it's in learning, whether it's in davening, whether it's in connecting to Hashem, whether it's in chesed, whether it's in our interpersonal relationships. It's very common for people to think, what's the point? I cannot completely change myself. I'm not going to be able to do a complete overhaul and become a totally new person anyway. So I may as well not do anything. Comes along Rabbi Akiva, and he illuminates and he shares with us a beautiful secret. Hashem is not an extremist. He's not all or nothing. He's not black and white. Just as Rabbi Akiva, just like a mikvah is mitaher tamei, Meaning, even if it's partial, even if it's not complete, even if the person is still going to have a secondary, more intense level of tumah, the mikvah still has an effect, still has a purpose, still has value, because it's going to remove the lesser level of tumah, just like the mikvah does that. So too, HaKadosh Baruch Hu mitaras Yisrael. Yes, we're not perfect people, and yes, we have a lifelong journey of growth and change and improvement. But don't think that there's no point to it, there's no purpose to it, unless I completely change myself and that change is lasting and I'm unrecognizable. Unless I could do it all, I may as well not do any. No, says Rabbi Akiva. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mitaras Yisrael just like a mikvah. Any little bit of change, any little bit of improvement, any little bit action or thought or effort to refine ourselves, to let go of negativity, to let go of things which are holding us back, even though there's plenty more that's broken, there's plenty more that's not perfect, there's plenty more that we're not proud of. Don't minimize and don't negate and belittle the positive change that we make. And that's the chiddush of Rabbi Akiva. And that's why Rabbi Akiva had to quote from Yecheskel and from Yirmiyah, because over there is the first time that we see comparing tshuva to a mikvah. That the mikvah has the power of incremental change, of bite-sized change, of tiny steps. And this is something which may sound like a beautiful idea, but it's very difficult for many of us to truly live by and to truly internalize and to truly embrace. Because we are used to thinking in terms of extremes. Either don't bother me, I am who I am, I've heard the shmooze and I've heard all the raid, take it or leave it. Or we go the other extreme. I am changing everything about my life. I am uprooting everything and I am aiming for absolute perfection. And I'm holding on to that so tight. We thrive. People tend to thrive in the extremes. The difficult place is the middle. It's the middle, which is very hard. I am changing in some things. I'm not changing. In some areas, I am making some incremental improvements, but then in other areas, I haven't made any progress at all in years. And that's a very difficult place to be, because the middle is very messy. It's not clearly defined. We don't have a label. Like, my label is that I'm the guy in the back of the shul, don't bother me, nothing touches me, I'm cool as a cucumber, I have this wall around me, and I'm just going to coast along. That's one label. The other label, I am constantly pushing myself and working on myself and tense and uptight and always looking at the negative, always looking at what I'm not doing right and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, very tense and very, very anxiety-ridden. That's also a label. But if I'm in the middle, I don't fit this label and I don't fit that label. And that's very confusing for people. But here is the secret, says Rabbi Akiva. What it means to be human. A human is somebody who's in the middle. A human is somebody who's not perfect. Hashem doesn't want perfect people, because for that he has malachim, for that he has angels. He wants people who are messy. He wants people who don't have and fit a clear label or fit into an Excel box. I can't categorize myself. I'm a little bit of this, and I'm a little bit of that, and I'm a little bit of the other. This guy who became Tameh, what's his status? Am I Tahar? Am I Tameh? In some things I'm Tahar, in some things I'm Tameh. I don't know. Oh, that's a very difficult place to be in the middle. The unknown. I can't I can't categorize myself. But that's what it means to be human. It means to be on the journey of growth. The journey of growth is messy. The journey of change is not neat with clearly defined parameters and a nice bow on top. And when we get used to and embrace the messiness of what it means to be human, then we could embark on this path of growth in little steps and little steps. Who said this halacha? Who introduced and revealed to us that the pathway to God is not black and white? It was Rabbi Akiva. Who better than Rabbi Akiva to tell us this lesson? Rabbi Akiva was talking from personal experience, because Rabbi Akiva was lishi tasai. Because Rabbi Akiva, as we all know, we know many things about his life. Number one, who was Rabbi Akiva? Rabbi Akiva was from the offspring of Sisra. Sisra was one of the sworn enemies of Klal Yisrael. Can you imagine if we have one of the Gedolei Hadar, the biggest Rosh Yeshivas, but we know his yichus, he came from an enemy of Klal Yisrael. It doesn't fit a nice box. He doesn't have the yichus. His father, his grandfather, his great-grandfather, they weren't Rosh Yeshivas, they weren't Rebbes. It doesn't fit a nice box. It's messy. Not only that, Rabbi Akiva himself, as we all know, he never learned until he was 40. He didn't go to the best yeshivas. If you look at his resume, how could he become a Rosh Yeshiva? He doesn't fit a box. I know of somebody who applied to become a Rebbe, an amazing Talmid Chacham, an amazing person, but the yeshiva didn't want to take him because he didn't go to the yeshivish enough yeshivas. It wasn't the right yeshiva. You had to fit a certain box. But that wasn't Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva didn't go to yeshiva until he was 40. And even more so, Rabbi Akiva is the famous story when he saw the water dripping onto the rock. What was the lesson Rabbi Akiva learned? Each drip counts, even if in the moment I don't see a result. Wow, that's his lesson. Every bit of change that we do, every bit of improvement that we do, every effort that we make counts to change us, even if in the moment we cannot discern and we cannot appreciate the change. But if we're consistent and we don't give up and we don't look for the result right away and we get comfortable with being human, with being messy, with not fitting a perfect square and a perfect label, says Rabbi Akiva, eventually, like the water, it's going to make a hole. We're going to get to our full potential and we're going to come to our ultimate relationship with Hashem.